Season 2 of House of the Dragon is expected to return with the infamous war known as the Dance of the Dragons. As stated in Fire and Blood, the death of Lucerys Velaryon was the incident that officially kicked off the inevitable war between the two factions. As we saw throughout Season 1, this conflict developed throughout the years, with contributions coming from both sides. In this video, I'm going to do a recap on what led them to this point, by discussing pivotal character decisions according to the events that transpired in House of the Dragon. Let's start with Viserys Targaryen, who was the king of Westeros for a majority of the time that we spent in the show thus far. Viserys was under the impression that the realm would need to be united in order to survive the long night that was foretold by Aegon the Conqueror. Yet, he made quite a few decisions that divided the realm, starting with naming his daughter Rhaenyra the heir to the Iron Throne. Viserys was there for the Great Council of 101, where the High Lords of Westeros favored him over his cousin Rhaenys to be their next monarch. Fire and Blood suggests that the Great Council established a precedent that the male descendant would always be favored in a matter of succession. The prologue in episode 1 implies that the same standard holds true in Hot D. But Viserys decided to go against this precedent by having the realm accept Rhaenyra as their future queen, which might have worked out if he didn't complicate his own succession by taking a new wife and fathering more children. However, Viserys didn't just choose anyone to be his new queen. He chose Rhaenyra's best friend, Alicent Hightower. Naturally, Rhaenyra had a problem with this, and their marriage effectively ruined their relationship. To further complicate the matter, Viserys' judgment was clouded by prophetic dreams, a dream that continued to feed his obsessive pursuit of having a son, well into his marriage with Alicent. This obsession was what led to the death of his first wife, and put him in position to be preyed upon by the Hightowers in the first place. 3 of his next 4 children turned out to be male, and while Viserys never made a change in the line of succession, his eldest son's existence hindered Rhaenyra's claim to the throne simply because of his gender. Aegon's claim was supported by law and precedents, and this was well known by not only the common people, but the High Lords of Westeros as well. This put Rhaenyra's claim into question once again, and the Hightowers were prepared to use Aegon's claim as the backbone of their agenda. Viserys was manipulated by Otto for years, but he eventually caught on to his game and dismissed him from his role at court. However, Viserys would later bring him back as hand despite his deceptive and self-serving history, ignoring the fact that Otto would potentially be acting in direct opposition to his named heir, Rhaenyra. Bringing him back put him in position to push the Green agenda and prepare for Aegon's ascension in the years leading up to Viserys' death. And by the time Viserys passed away, the Greens not only had full control of the court, they also had a male heir to support with a legitimate claim to the throne and an obvious vendetta against Rhaenyra, all of which happened on Viserys' watch. His health got progressively worse as the season went on, and his last words essentially guaranteed that the realm would plunge into war. But he had the power to prevent many points of conflict from developing throughout the years, while he was still in the condition to do so. Viserys tried to defuse the escalating conflict within his family, but he should be held accountable for fathering a son that put Rhaenyra's claim into question, and for allowing an opposing faction to form against her. In the end, his best efforts to reinforce and protect Rhaenyra's claim became a temporary shield that would break as soon as he passed away. Viserys had a hand in destabilizing the realm, but Otto Hightower played a featured role in setting the stage for this conflict. His ambition to win the Game of Thrones was one of the driving factors behind it all. He plotted to have his grandson ascend the throne, which caused him to act against Viserys' favor and plans to overthrow Rhaenyra in the process. In order to accomplish this, he forced an opening in the line of succession by pushing Daemon out of the picture. This opened the door for Rhaenyra to take his place, and while Otto initially supported her claim, he never truly intended to follow through with it. With Daemon exiled from court, Otto was free to run his game on Viserys and implement the next stage of his plan. Aemma's death meant that Viserys would need to remarry. With the king in need of a new queen, Otto used his daughter Alicent to win over his favor, betting that she would be chosen to be his next wife. Things would work out in his favor, and before long, Otto got exactly what he wanted from their marriage, which was a male heir to succeed Viserys. While Viserys never came around to the idea of favoring Aegon over Rhaenyra, Otto capitalized on the opportunity to secure Aegon's claim by conspiring with Hobart Hightower and a few members of the small council to ensure his ascension upon Viserys' death. In the years before his death, Otto conditioned Alicent to antagonize Rhaenyra for the sake of their family, and she would later go on to teach her children the same. When the time came to handle the matter of succession, not only did Otto follow through with his plans to overthrow Rhaenyra, he also intended to kill her and her family in the process. Ultimately, if Otto chose to respect and honor Viserys' wish of having Rhaenyra succeed him on the throne from the start, there would be no conflict to speak of. But instead, he conspired to overthrow Rhaenyra and encouraged other High Lords to join him, knowing that war with Rhaenyra's faction was a likely outcome. While most of Viserys' decisions were backed by prophecy or good intentions, the same could not be said of Otto, who acted in favor of his house above all, regardless of the consequences. The two men at the top for the majority of the season were the primary reason the Greens and the Blacks descended into conflict, but their daughters also played a role in letting things get out of hand. In the first half of the season, we saw Rhaenyra struggle with her role as heir and reject the idea of marriage altogether. Most of her questionable decisions throughout the years were used by the Greens to justify their agenda and strengthen their position. But the irony of Rhaenyra's character arc is that no matter what she did or didn't do in the years leading up to her father's succession, her claim to the throne upon his death would have still been rejected by Otto and some, if not most of the men in power, in large part due to her gender. This was even something that Rhaenys told her about when she was still a teenager as a fair warning. As an adult, Rhaenyra took the high road on multiple occasions to try and ease the tension between the two factions. But perhaps things would have turned out differently if she never made an enemy out of Alicent in the first place. Alicent was one of Rhaenyra's biggest advocates in the first half of the season, and could have been a powerful ally to have as Rhaenyra grew into her role as heir. While their relationship was trending downward, it was effectively ruined when Rhaenyra lied about her virginity in order to protect the perception of her virtue. Although it was Daemon who originally took her out that night and coerced her into hooking up with him, it was Rhaenyra who decided to do the same with Criston Cole. This decision would not only make an enemy out of Alicent, but a Knight of the Kingsguard as well. In the following years, Rhaenyra and Harwin had an affair that provided Rhaenyra with the heirs that she couldn't produce with Laenor. However, their relationship added controversy to Rhaenyra's claim because her children were widely believed to be fathered by Harwin, which would make them illegitimate by law. While her affair did a number on her public perception at court, the illegitimacy of her children became a bigger factor in increasing the tension between the Greens and the Blacks. Although Viserys feigned ignorance and spared Rhaenyra the consequences of her actions, Alicent was not so forgiving of her blatant audacity. She would go on to use the truth of their identity to create tension between their children, which ultimately led to the incident at Driftmark and later developed into the incident at Storm's End. Rhaenyra managed to antagonize a few of the major houses throughout Season 1, such as the Hightowers, the Lannisters, and even the Velaryons, who ended up siding with her anyways. But rather than remain in the capital to try and find friends and make allies to support her cause, she fled the capital and alienated herself in the final years of Viserys' life. This decision, which was partly made in shame, gave the Greens all the political levers they needed to secure their succession while Viserys' health continued to decline. Not to mention the fact that it robbed her of the opportunity to claim the throne immediately after her father's death. Instead, she was forced to react after it was already too late. Rhaenyra's role in this conflict is directly tied to the strength of her claim and her relationship with the Hightowers. She tried to fix the bridge between their two families multiple times to no avail, but she had more than 10 years to prepare for her succession, and instead of solidifying herself as the rightful heir, she weakened her claim, isolated herself from court, and expected everything to fall into place, despite knowing better. On the other side of the coin, we have Alicent, who as a teenager was used by her father so that he could advance his political ambition. Certainly, she doesn't deserve any blame for that. However, as an adult, she can be held accountable for instigating the conflict between the two factions and refusing to set aside their differences until it was too late. It's implied that Alicent genuinely misinterpreted Viserys' last words to mean that he wanted their son to be his successor. In a way, this was the last piece of justification that she needed to move forward with Aegon's coronation. But in the years leading up to the succession, Alicent was already under the impression that her son was going to succeed Viserys. As queen, she had the power to be the deciding factor in the controversy over the succession. But rather than support Rhaenyra's claim, she lived with the intention of destroying it for years. Some would argue rightfully so, because of Rhaenyra's decisions. But instead of making peace where she could, Alicent deliberately rejected Rhaenyra's attempts to make peace and taught her children to antagonize her and her family. This is evident in episode 6, where Alicent rejects Rhaenyra's marriage proposal. Her proposal to marry Jason Helena may not have been enough in of itself to have prevented war, but it would have been something to build upon, and Alicent clearly had no intention of making peace at that point. At Driftmark, the growing animosity between their children boils over when Jace draws a knife on Aemon, following a comment that he and his siblings were bastards. In the aftermath of the incident, Alicent assaults Rhaenyra in public, expressing to everyone involved that no love has been lost between them, and that she's willing to do whatever it takes to protect her family and win the game. Perhaps if Alicent allowed the children to remain friendly with each other, the incidents at Driftmark never happen, and the tension between their families never gets violent. While the Hightowers made it seem like their push for Aegon's claim was about law, precedence, and tradition, it was really about them denying Rhaenyra the throne and remaining in power. Aegon had no intention of being king, and he didn't even consider himself a worthy successor to Viserys. Their whole family knows what type of person Aegon is, and in spite of that, they risked a war with Rhaenyra's faction in order to put him on the Iron Throne. Alicent had a sharp change of heart late in the season, with the intention of making up with Rhaenyra and later on, the intention of sparing her life following Viserys' death. But she had more than enough time on her side to set aside their differences and work to make things right. It was simply too late. Aside from the main players in the royal family, there were a few others who had an influential role in creating conflict between these two factions. Daemon Targaryen is a powerful dragon lord known throughout Westeros for his violence and radical behavior. His status and reputation has often led to him clashing heads with Otto Hightower, and it's no secret that they despise each other. Throughout the years, Daemon has insulted Otto and threatened his life on multiple occasions. If it weren't for Rhaenyra, Daemon probably would have already killed Otto when he had the chance. In any case, Daemon is now tied to Rhaenyra, and the ill will that he shares with Otto has only added to the tension between the two sides. One of the main points of conflict between the Greens and the Blacks is the controversy surrounding Rhaenyra's children. At the end of the day, Rhaenyra made her own decisions with Harwin and Laenor when she decided to start her own family, but it was Daemon who gave her the impression that it was okay to love and hook up with whoever she wanted outside of her marriage. His homecoming in episode 4 had a major effect on Rhaenyra, who ended up hooking up with Criston Cole and later decided to find love on her own terms. While Rhaenyra has her own issues with the Hightowers, Daemon has given them another reason to antagonize her claim, in fear of what they might be capable of if she were to become queen. Next we have Larys Strong, who made sure to spoil Rhaenyra and Alicent's relationship by revealing Rhaenyra's secret. Chances are that they would have eventually become enemies without his intervention, but he definitely expedited the process by giving Alicent a lead towards the truth. And when she found out what Rhaenyra was really up to that night, she figuratively declared war on her. But of course, Larys was quite busy throughout the season, working to give Alicent the impression that he's her loyal servant. And by ordering the death of his father, he opened the door for Otto to come back into the fold and once again establish the Green Agenda upon the politics of Westeros. As previously discussed, this gave Otto the chance to put everything in place for Aegon's ascension upon Viserys' death. In hindsight, he not only wanted Rhaenyra and Alicent to become enemies, he also made sure to leave the Greens in good position to overthrow Rhaenyra by making room for Otto to become Hand again. While there were a few other characters that had an important role in the conflict that led to the Dance of the Dragons, I believe that these are the 6 who had the greatest influence compared to their counterparts. Characters such as Criston Cole, Lucerys, Aemon, Mysaria, and a few others may have done a thing or two to bring the two factions into greater conflict, but their influence was complementary compared to that of the major players. Coming at the topic from a different perspective, the people who had the power to really turn things around or prevent war were Viserys, Otto, Rhaenyra, and Alicent. At the end of the day, All of these characters had moments where they acted in their own favor and those where they made mistakes. In any case, let me know your thoughts on the topic in the comments below. That's it for me. Thank you for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe for more content like this. Peace.